about that speech, the whole convention, wrapping it all up. Let's bring in our panel. David Drucker, Associate Politics Editor for Roll Call. Dan Balls, National Political Correspondent at The Washington Post. Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill. And Steve Hayes, Senior Writer for The Weekly Standard. Okay, gentlemen. David, your thoughts. I talked to Britt earlier. He was saying it was workmanlike, it was solid, it wasn't flourishing, but it got the job done. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you have to look at these speeches for who's delivering them, maybe not who has delivered these speeches in the past. And if you look at Mitt Romney and who he's been in this campaign, I think he gave a very good speech and probably better than I thought he was capable of doing. And the key for him, let's take a look at what has been hurting him. You look at his favorable numbers are underwater. You look at the fact that people don't really know him. They want to vote against Barack Obama in a lot of these swing states, but they don't know who this guy is. And so what did we learn the past couple days? We learned who he is, and Mitt Romney finally talked about himself, and there is now a counter-argument or a forward argument about who he is, not just the Obama campaign argument. And so because he was able to do that, I thought it was very successful. And I have to say, for somebody who does tend to be pretty stiff, he at least looked relaxed and like he was enjoying himself, and I think that's important.
Yeah, Dan, is the bar that he had to get over, can this guy be president?
That was part of the bar. I mean, as David said, one of the things he had to do was give a little bit more of himself, make people feel a little bit more comfortable. I don't think that's the key for him to win the election, and I think he probably was able to do that enough, both through his speech and some of that personal testimony that was given, particularly from members of his church. I thought that was a very important moment, even though it wasn't in prime time.
Well, you know what, as we're talking about that, we have a clip of that. Two different families who gave some testimonials, if you will, about Mitt Romney and their families. Take a listen.
As I sat with her in intensive care, consumed with a mother's worry and fear, dear Mitt came to visit and pray with me. And I will never forget how, when he looked down tenderly at my daughter, his eyes filled with tears, and he reached out and gently stroked her tiny back.
Over a period of 7 months, he was in and out of Children's Hospital in Boston for treatment. David, knowing Mitt had gone to law school at Harvard, asked Mitt if he would help him write a will. Together, they made David's will. He wanted Mitt to pronounce his eulogy, and Mitt was there to honor that request.
Oh, we don't have the shots in there, Dan, but there were a lot of people tearing up in that hall.
Absolutely. I mean, there were not a lot of dry eyes through both of those. So it was things like that that were helpful. I was struck by a couple of other things in the speech, though, Brett. One was this was a different kind of speech than he has given in the past. I mean, as you know, part of his basic stump speech is the United States under Barack Obama is heading towards Europe. We heard none of that. And we didn't hear as much in terms of sort of the size and scope of government. I mean, it seemed to me that he was looking less to the base and a little bit more to some of those swing voters.
Juan?
Well, I thought that, it was kind of a celebration, and I had that sense that the speech achieved that goal, that it was a celebration for the base and for the delegates that were in the hall last night. If I think about sort of agenda items that I would have ticked off politically, I would have said, number one, he's got to do better with women. And as you noticed, he went through a litany of women who not only are prominent Republicans, but whom he hired in the past and has good relations. That wonderful story about his mother saying women can have some voice when she was running for the Senate. So I think on that score, he was trying to make inroads. I'm not sure that he made a lot, but he was trying. And with regard to Hispanics, again, it was up to the surrogates, people who really came on and had something to say, especially Marco Rubio, who introduced him, more so than anything he was able to convey in terms of energy there. I thought with regard to President Obama, he spoke with a sense of regret, as if, we'd had high hopes for President Obama, but he just isn't up to the job. And he said at one point that he hoped that President Obama had succeeded. And that, the highlight of Obama was the moment he was elected, and that was it. That was the best you ever felt about Obama. And immediately what came to my mind is, well, what about bin Laden, killing bin Laden? What about Afghanistan? What about Iraq? And today, there have been lots of criticism from right and left to say, why didn't he talk about Afghanistan?
Yeah, he did talk about the killing of bin Laden, congratulating the president on that, but you're right, he did not mention Afghanistan. We'll talk about that in the lightning round. Steve, you've had less than 24 hours to digest. We heard what you said last night. Thoughts in addition to that?
I mean, I think the speech basically did its job. There were some good moments. I thought the delivery was very strong, but I agree with Dan entirely. I mean, this was really a non-ideological speech. It was meant to appeal to the people that we've been talking all along that this election may be decided by their votes. You know, the suburban housewife in Columbus who may or may not have been pro-choice, may or may not like Barack Obama or have supported Barack Obama in 2008. And I think that's why you heard the tone that you heard. You know, Mitt Romney saying, in effect, we are really disappointed. But it wasn't ideological. The only part that was ideological was the foreign policy part. It was a strong foreign policy critique, very short, but a strong and I think ideological foreign policy part, but the rest of the speech was not at all.
Okay, well, this has really grabbed some eyeballs today on pretty much every channel. It was sort of like flypaper out there for a lot of media flies. Clint Eastwood.
Whether you're Democrat or whether you're a Republican or whether you're libertarian or whatever, you're the best, and we should not ever forget that. And when somebody does not do the job, we've got to let them go. I just wondered all these promises, and then I wondered about you know, what do you want me to tell Romney? I can't tell him to do that. Can't do that to himself. You're crazy.
Okay, the imaginary President Obama in the chair there, the empty chair. David, what about that?
Well, I think they could have done without it. It was a very beautiful program, and that was sort of weird and awkward. Although I have to say, the people at home didn't see the rest of the program, and my sort of non-scientific focus group from people who were over 50 who watched it, they like Clint, and they liked it. And so I still say they shouldn't have done it, but I don't really think we're going to be talking about this in a week, and I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, to hear some of these analysts today, Dan, it was like this became the Clint Eastwood convention. I do think that the reaction of Ann Romney, at least the cutaway shots, suggested that there was some angst about that appearance in the Romney campaign.
It certainly sounded as though she was unhappy about it. I mean, this is an example of why conventions are scripted. This was the one unscripted moment, and it didn't quite go the way anybody had anticipated it. Now, I think in the great scheme of things, it'll pass, but it was a reminder to me of the degree to which we live in an environment now, a media environment with Twitter and, you know, everything else, in which something like that, which is a tiny distraction, becomes a huge moment. And I think one of the disadvantages for Governor Romney was that last night and this morning, so much of the time was spent talking about Clint Eastwood and not about some of the lines that he delivered about President Obama.
Took some of the oxygen out of the room. Quickly, you two?
Well, I'm a big Clint Eastwood fan. I think he's thrilling. I guess I'm in the over 50 group that David's talking about. So I was sorely disappointed to see my hero look so uncertain, and you know, not incoherence, probably too strong, but it didn't seem to hold together. I never got what is the message, what is the point, and it even seemed a little bit degrading to the president, and I wasn't comfortable with that.
Well, one thing, it did stretch on. I think he had 5 minutes, it went 12 minutes, and it really pushed back the Romney speech.
It pushed back the program a little bit. Look, I mean, generally when there's a consensus among the Washington press corps that something is awful and horrendous, I like it, but that wasn't necessarily the case this time around. The big practical problem is that we spent a lot of time today, everybody spent a lot of time today talking about Clint Eastwood and not Mitt Romney, but also not Marco Rubio, who was, this program last night was meant to highlight Marco Rubio, and many more minutes spent talking about Clint Eastwood than Marco Rubio.
Next up, the Friday Lightning Round.